We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House. You're watching Worldview Tube, a Brannon House television network.
The Tamara Scott Show. Tamara has served as the state director for one of America's largest pro-life, pro-family public policy organizations. In 2007, Tamara was named one of America's top 10 most influential kingmakers by the Religion News Association. Tamara has spent years proclaiming and defending the values of a Christian worldview that is the foundation of our constitutional republic. And now, here is your host, Tamara Scott.
Hey, everybody, welcome. I am Tamara Scott. It is the Tamara Scott Show. It is June 10th, 6/10/2025, in the year of our Lord. I think we should say that. It used to be on the documents. I just think we should bring it back just to remind people. All right, so we help you when the headlines hit home. And we help you live God's word in today's world when the headlines hit home. So we're kind of focusing right now on the big headlines of the weekend, and they still keep coming because there's just so much fact versus fiction on this particular situation, talking about the LA raids that started after ICE was doing work Friday. We'll get into that. We'll talk about that with our guest. And then there's just been so much more coming out. You know, there's a saying that Satan overplays his hand, right? I'm not calling anybody Satan here. I'm just saying a lot of this behavior is not, it's evil. It's flat out evil, right? And those who are on the side of this evil, I think, are overplaying their hands, and I think it's not going to pay off well for them. So joining me today is Dennis Behreandt. If you watch this show, you know how much we highly respect Dennis Behreandt, his ability to collect information, to analyze it, and then to put it in a form where the rest of us can read through it easily, quickly understand it. The book I'm talking about that he wrote, Endgame. He was kind enough to come on the show and do a series every month. We went through a different chapter. So those of you who are busy, we gave you time to get that chapter read. And then he went through that chapter on our show. And I so appreciated that, Dennis. I just really appreciated that. Now I usually tab things up. I'm proud of myself. I didn't tab it too bad, but I did end up putting a whole bunch of notes in the back. I have my own notes. The easy thing about that is when I need to go speak and I need a statement or to remind myself of a statistic, or then I just grab that out and I go. So I'm giving you all my clues right there. This book is not mine. It was a friend of mine's who sent it my way. But I did tab here. You can tell it's not tabbed. I was so impressed. I took it out. You know her, Tammy Kobsa. I was so impressed. It was obviously read, but she doesn't scribble through hers like I do. She can read just by reading. I cannot read without a pencil in my hand. And sometimes it's colored pencils for coding. So, all right. So listen, this book, guys, it's called Endgame. Dennis is an author, a journalist, a speaker, and just incredible on analyzing world events, the situations that we see unfolding before us. He has that history behind him to help us wade through it, navigate as we're living it, but also then to help us analyze what is taking place. So Endgame, Dennis, what I appreciate about this book is you don't just tell us your opinions. You put the facts in there. And then you have the endnotes one, which I appreciate. I want people to understand. I don't know if you can see it on air. Look how thick the endnotes are from here. That right there, that section is the endnotes, the sources for you. So you can go find it yourself, read it for yourself. And then, this is my fave, this last part is the index. It's like the hashtags are what we call it today, but it's the index. So you can read through so quickly and find when you're talking about something specific, you can see where he's written about it in the page numbers, and sometimes multiple page numbers. For instance, Auschwitz, 65, 68, 278. Australia's listed several times. I just want to commend you. I don't know if you're working on another one, but if you are, let me know, because yours are easy to read and I appreciate the information. So thank you for Endgame, Dennis.
You're welcome, Tamara, and thank you so much for having me on the show. And I'm deeply engaged in research for what hopefully will follow Endgame. It's going to be a bit different. It's not really going to get into the transhumanism thing as directly as Endgame does, but I think it's going to be, in a sense, a prequel that's going to lay the groundwork to help explain a lot of what we're seeing now and how that relates to what's in that book. And again, like with Endgame, I want to make it a resource so that people have access to the sources directly. They're not just listening to me tell them about something. They can go and check my work. And I want people to check my work because they'll find out even more than what I can put in the book. A book is limited to some degree. You can't just have an infinite amount of space. So there's always a lot more for people to discover, and the resources that I use for notes hopefully help people discover those.
Absolutely. And if I were still homeschooling, mine have thankfully graduated. And I will say, I had great scholarships. One had college provided, though they opted not to take that offering from the college. School provided, though his wife did participate in that, by the way. I'm just going to tell you that because as a homeschooler, I never felt like I was adequately prepared. I was any dummy can do it poster child for homeschooling. And I'm just saying, God provided. If you are under that question for your children, let me just say to you, seek, of course, wise counsel, pray it through, weigh it out for your family, but consider it. And I was going to say, this is one of those books. I would want this on my shelf if I were still homeschooling. This is a great one for kids. If you've got junior high, high school kids, we can talk about current events, a multitude of issues. That's one of the books I would have. All right. So I'm excited to hear you have the prequel coming out. I didn't know. I'm excited. All right.
It's going to take a lot of work. I mean, I'm still in the, beginning phases, and I'd say it's like an iceberg. What you don't see in the beginning phases is, 78 to 80% of what happens with you writing a book. So
I honor that. I have been asked to write a couple of different times, and it's not, I feel like I'm almost being disobedient. I want to be obedient, but it is that delay, and there's just hesitation because for me, here's how I say it. It's, when you get that chocolate malt and it's so cold and thick in the very beginning, you can hardly get anything up the straw. You just have to really pull to get something up the straw. For me, it's the reverse. There's so much in here. When I'm studying a topic, there's so much. I don't know how to get it through the straw back out in an orderly fashion.
You hit the nail on the head. That is a challenge.
Yeah, even for these shows, every day, I'm like the last minute getting my notes to my producer because we just keep finding more and more and more, as you say. There's just more and more. We're not pulling something out and misconstruing it or sending it out of context. We are laying it out for people and explaining what the media won't. And in this event, I've got on the Facebook page, the Tamara Scott Show Facebook page, I have a video from one of the media folks, and even who they interview. One individual says, they're asking about these riots. Oh, I don't think it's necessary. We have security in place to handle these types of things. Well, tell me, friend, when was the last time the former administration ever used that security or those border checks to help protect us from what we're seeing now today in LA? And what you're seeing with Trump sending in troops is exactly that, using that security and those things we have to protect our country. But the slant is so that anybody's against or protecting our Constitution, we're the bad guys. One of the other folks, and I don't know how they found him, was saying that these poor people are going to feel like they're, from the countries banned that Trump just recently with his executive order that went into effect, those countries, those people are going to feel singled out and separated from families if they want to travel and visit their families. I've got my response to that, but Dennis, what's your thought when somebody says that as if us putting in a travel ban from countries who have proven to send people here who do harm is bad for us as a nation?
Well, as a nation, we do have to be aware of security threats, and we are not in a threat-free environment internationally. Far from it, actually. It's a dangerous environment out there and has been for many, many years now. And our previous administrations have been, shall we say, uneven in how they protected the United States from some of these things. And I think the current administration is seeing some of the travel vectors for which some really unsavourable activity and unsavory characters are coming through to conduct those activities, and they're trying to block those off. I don't think that's a permanent situation. If we all want to get back to a more peaceful environment where, people can visit their families and travel unimpeded, then the people who are more inclined to conduct, worst case scenario, terroristic activities, crimes, drug trafficking, human trafficking, then those avenues need to be addressed. Those avenues need to be blocked, and those crimes need to be stopped because they're harming people. They're harming the people who live in those countries. They're harming the people who live in this country, and that criminality cannot continue. We can't have a civilized world under threat like that. And so that's what you see happening. We have a law and order administration, and we have law and order administrations popping up in a few other countries internationally, and there's a good faith effort underway to interdict these crimes that are taking place and that are really harming people all across the world. I mean, who is going to argue that we haven't had a significant worldwide human trafficking problem? It's enormous, and the criminality is unthinkable, and the number of people who've been harmed, up to and including murdered, as a part of this human trafficking trade that's taking place internationally, it's unthinkable, and it has to be stopped. So unfortunately, that's the situation we're in. These crimes have to be stopped, and I think that we are finally at a point where we have an administration that's willing to do, at least in some areas, the hard work to put an end to these crimes that are, hurting people all over the world, and including in this country.
Yeah. And I think most people want law and order. The Bible would tell us that, we have a God of order. Confusion comes from Satan. If I can say that to some of our viewers, you'll understand that. Some of you may not, but it's true. Satan is the author of confusion. Where God is, there is peace. Where the Holy Spirit is, there's peace. There's understanding. So we need law and order. You won't have law and order unless you control your border. Just that simple. It's a slogan. It rhymes. You can put it on a sign. But if you want law and order, you have to control your border. It's just that simple. All right. So Reagan, can you put up photo 3? This is out of a Jesse Waters monologue, but man, he rolled through a lot of information here. He's got a clip, as you can see, from ABC7, and I assume it's the anchor. They don't give the name, but the anchor is saying that let me see if I can find it so I say it absolutely correctly in the words he said it. These are just people having fun. It could turn volatile. What is a bunch of people having fun, just watching cars burn, could become very vulnerable with Trump sending in troops. Now, I don't know the date that individual said that, but help me out here. People just having fun burning down cars, unless it's your car you're burning, I don't think it's much fun for anybody else. And even if you're burning your own car, I don't know where are all the environmentalists, I guess. This is just not something people think of as fun.
Right. It definitely creates carbon dioxide, and aren't we supposed to be against that?
Where are the leftists?
Right. Well, Greta Thunberg, I think she was interdicted there in the Eastern Mediterranean recently, so maybe she can get back on the job.
And she's now on a flight back. She's now on a flight back.
Yep.
No, she doesn't like to use those planes, but she's headed home.
Yep, she's making carbon dioxide right now. But that's private property. Those cars are owned by someone, and those people have now suffered an enormous loss. I don't know if anyone's gone car shopping lately, but these things are not inexpensive. And so I guess, maybe it'd be look at, well, the insurance company is going to pay for it. Well, then everybody pays for it because rates go up. Insurance companies pull out of places that are prone to these kind of disasters and violence. And everyone at large ends up paying the price for this kind of behavior. This is another example of how criminality, whatever the scale might be in one place, can affect a lot of people around the country. And that's what's happening here. And I think that, what kind of a corrupt thinking do the Democrats and their allies have when they say, well, it's just a lot of fun, harmless fun to be burning down cars? I guess it was just a lot of harmless fun to burn down Minneapolis a few years ago.
Right. In a minority neighborhood. In a minority neighborhood, and many of those were owned. We interviewed the former county sheriff, and he said many of those were owned by minorities themselves, as
right.
These folks were supposedly marching for the rights of minorities.
Right. Now, let's think about it in terms of just basic services that communities need. So one of the services communities need is access to goods that are sold through various retail establishments, whether it be a drugstore, like a Walgreens or a CVS, or a grocery store, or an electronics retailer, whatever it may be. People need those goods and services. It'd be nice to have them where they're readily accessible. If that neighborhood is repeatedly prone to violence, people are getting robbed, cars are getting burned, stores are getting looted, as we see in LA, how should we expect those companies to keep their retail presence in those areas?
Right.
And they're not. They're going to pull out. And you've seen Walgreens, you've seen CVS, you've seen other companies pull their stores out of areas that are prone to these kind of violence. And then who's suffering? Well, it's the innocent people who are trying to just live their lives there who are suffering because the violent perpetrators of this criminality, by causing this criminality to happen, by burning down cars and rioting and causing all of these things, um, they're harming the innocent people who they claim they wish to care for and protect. They're doing just the exact opposite. And of course, they're all tied into, they're not innocent alone actors, they're not innocent single actors, they're all tied into a national political party. We know it as the Democrats. And I think what you're seeing emerge in this particular case in LA is that you're seeing that the Democrats are not just a national political party, but they're part of a greater international organization that is conducting this violence across the country, probably coming soon this weekend, if we are to believe what is scheduled in some of the flyers that are out there and some of the propaganda about what's going to happen across the country on June 14th.
And we will talk about that a little bit later, what's possibly coming. All right, when you mentioned the loss of options for people in the neighborhoods, residents who need these things in their neighborhoods, and we know the value is there when you have more opportunities. We hear about the choice in America, the things we see on the shelves, that's all leaving us. And I would say, who else wants that? The communist. When we hear all this minimalism, we hear communism. We'll talk about that. Could that possibly be tied to these riots as well? We'll talk about that when we come back. Dennis Behreandt is my guest today, author, journalist, speaker. His book, Endgame, was incredible on transhumanism and COVID. Stay tuned. More on these riots, the timeline, the truth. Stay tuned with Tamara Scott, The Tamara Scott Show. And welcome back, everybody. I am Tamara Scott, The Tamara Scott Show. We know you know we always offer this little sachet, slender little sachet, almost turn it sideways, and it almost disappears there on the screen. It has the collagen, cast claw, and astaxanthin. Together, these three items and a few more ingredients got the award for cognitive function in 2023 and in 2024 in the sports arena for active ingredients, nutrition, and format. But best is what we heard from you, our viewers, some of you who tried this product. You noticed better joint health, improved mobility, improved immunity, stress management, endurance, less fatigue, muscle recovery, mental clarity and focus, and gut health. You also noticed computer vision syndrome being alleviated, less eye strain and fatigue, enhanced visual acuity, depth perception, and helping with dry eyes. I noticed that as well, but I didn't put it together with the product until some of you said it. As well, many are noticing firmer, smoother skin texture, fewer fine lines and wrinkles, improved skin elasticity, decreased age spots, more even skin tone, improved skin hydration, reduced oxidative stress, healthier nails, less cellulite, hair health, and better sleep. Now, you can call those cosmetic, you can call those perks, whatever you want to call them. Maybe they're byproducts of simply being healthier. And who doesn't want any of those, whether it's fewer fine lines and wrinkles or less cellulite or just better overall confidence in the way you present yourself? We need you fighting on the front line. We need you fighting for your family and your freedom. So that's why we offer this little sachet. For me, I love being able to get it so easily in the packet. I rip it, I sip it, and I flip it in the trash, and I'm done. I can take it in my car, the studio, the home, wherever I am. You can go to Tamara, TAMARA.BellaGraceGlobal.com, right there on your screen. Tamara, TAMARA.BellaGraceGlobal.com. You'll see before and after photos. You'll see informational videos, and you'll see there are other products like the skincare, which I said I'd never use, and I now would not be without it. So again, Tamara, TAMARA.pellegraceglobal.com. All right. I want to turn to Dennis Behreandt, my guest today, author of Endgame. Dennis, we're talking about these these LA riots. Let's talk. Okay, first off, people are suggesting that these weren't real riots, as if they're not similar to riots we've had in the past. You and I just went through the cars burning up. That was already happening before Trump sent in the troops, right? So a DHS, and on the article from Fox News, and I think you sent this to me, a DHS statement said Saturday last night, so that would be Friday night, over 1,000 rioters surrounded federal enforcement building and assaulted ICE law enforcement officers, slashed tires, defaced buildings, and tax-funded property. It took Los Angeles police 2 hours to respond, and there is concerns that maybe they were told to stand down by the mayor. So I just want to put this out there. Trump, this is not caused by Trump sending in troops. He's sending in troops because of what escalated on Friday, correct?
That is correct. The initiating fact, which is still has some questions that I think need to be asked and answered, but the initial fact of the riot, what started the entire thing was ICE was conducting an effort to serve some warrants related to an investigation into money laundering in a particular business. And that business, I've seen a figure bandied about, might have been $80 million of imports that were not properly documented or paid for with regard to taxation and tariffs. And this was all tied back allegedly to some cartel activity, so drug cartel activity in Mexico. And so this was part of an investigation that did not directly have to do with immigration, but had to do with international criminal conspiracy with regard to this, with regard to the alleged allegations against this company. So that's what was the initial starting point for the riots. Supposedly, apparently, a key figure with the Service Employees International Union was there and impeded the operation. As part of the effort to impede the ICE agents in serving these warrants. And that person, I think, was initially arrested. I'm not sure if they were charged, but I believe they've now been released. That is what kicked off the escalation of the riots from that point forward. So one of the questions is, how did the SEIU executive leader find out about this service of warrants with regard to this ICE investigation or federal investigation of this criminal alleged conspiracy? How did that person get there? What kind of source of information did they have, and who was giving that information to them? So there's clearly something more going on right from the get-go at the start of these riots. So it's not organic. Something happened. We don't know what it is. Maybe we'll learn. Hopefully we will. I understand from federal resources that I've heard about that there is an investigation ongoing into what took place at the beginning of this, as well as into subsequent funding, because much as the media might want people to believe this is some kind of spontaneous outburst of violence, it is clearly not. Clearly there is some very large funding going into these riots, and there's some NGOs involved, and it was quickly uncovered by some people doing some investigation online, which we probably wouldn't have learned about unless Elon Musk hadn't purchased Twitter and renamed it X and made it more of a free speech platform. A lot of this information is being transmitted through there by independent researchers who are doing great work.
Absolutely. All right. And we'll talk about some of that funding in the next segment, I think. So on the SEIU, I think that's the union boss that Maxine Waters has so championed, and she was trying to break into the facility, the center, the detention center, I think, for that individual, not so much for the little people that they are claiming they're concerned about, people separated from their families. I don't know what a union boss gets paid, but that seems to be the one that she was concerned about, if I can just say that. All right, I want to show, if you can, Reagan, photo 1. This is, again, back to that Jesse Waters monologue, which I put on the Facebook for you, for the Tamara Scott Facebook page. Let's show photo 1. This has 4 of the criminals. This was not an ICE raid per se that we think of immigration. These were supposed criminals who had warrants. And if they had warrants, then they'd also had due process. A judge had reviewed and signed off. So there would be due process, because we heard in some of the mutterings from protesters that these folks were just being stolen, separated from families, and no due process. So it looks like these are some of the These are some of the criminals that we've heard discussed. We've heard child predator involved here. We've heard other situations. And then go to photo 2 if you can. This man apparently, according to Jesse Waters, was the individual, you all remember probably, this hit the news, was kicked out of a graduation party, went back and shot 2 people at a graduation party. That's supposedly this individual. So these are not, when we hear what people are saying, you're separating families. Well, there used to be a saying for Americans, for citizens, we used to hear it. If you can't do the time, don't do the crime. When you separate somebody because they're guilty of something, that's far different than what we're hearing implied by these people that say we're separating families in these raids as if they're broad sweeping and we're just ripping children or parents away from each other. I don't think that's the case. Any more comment on that, Dennis?
Yeah, I think, we talked earlier about how this is an effort, broadly speaking, by our current administration to return to some degree of law and order for the country and maybe even internationally as we start to, return more carefully to our business as a government of protecting people from crime. And that's exactly what this is. So these are people who have been arrested. Like you said, they had due process. There were warrants issued because they'd been alleged to have been engaged in very serious crimes against other people. So do we not, as a civilization, do we not as a country want families to be protected from random criminal acts? I think we do. Over the past several years, you've heard repeatedly about in Mexico, there'd be birthday parties where a teenager was having a birthday party. And then, for some reason, there was some cartel operatives who broke into that birthday party and executed all these people. You've had journalists hung from overpasses in Mexico, executed for trying to do their job to let people know what's happening in Mexico. Do we want that kind of rampant criminality tied to cartels here in the streets of America? And let's just go back to a few years ago to Los Angeles. Los Angeles, only since, the Rodney King era, really has really exploded into violence now for, decades since then. But Los Angeles was once one of our greatest cities, one of the world's greatest cities, a place where people dreamt of going to start a career, to enhance their career, to find their fortune, to have good luck, to live the American dream. And now I think if you mention Los Angeles, like you mentioned some of our other cities, once great cities, people kind of cower in fear.
Right.
I know people who went to Los Angeles thinking of the Los Angeles as it was in the past and who rapidly decided that was a bad idea and left. And I think we've seen a big exodus of people from California in general, as well as from other blue run states. And we really have to ask the question, if this is what we're seeing happen, what are the causal factors? And the causal factors are the fact that governments in those areas are failing to protect people. They're failing to protect property. And now we have a federal administration. When we have agents from one of our federal law enforcement organizations who can't do their job by serving a warrant and they're attacked, what kind of response do we expect there to be if the local authorities will not help protect them? So, of course, we see the federal response that we have, which is President Trump doing what he's done to send in National Guard troops and possibly some Marines. And, there's got to be some level of protection, and that's what's taking place. I don't think we should be surprised.
Right. And Gavin Newsom, who didn't do anything to stop this. Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, has failed in multiple situations this year. And I tried not to come down on her when she was out of country when the fires took place. But there had been warnings and forecasted high winds and high risk, and she still went. That's up to her. I'm not saying she could or shouldn't. But then she didn't do a media report, I think, an interview on it for 45 days, I think it was afterwards. My point is, they're very good at pointing the finger somewhere else when they're, as my mother used to say, 3 pointing back at them, right? We're dealing with this because now Newsom wouldn't deal with it. He apparently can't. Trump has called him incompetent, and it's proving true, to be honest with you. It's proving true. So do you have any comments on whether it's Bass, Newsom, and all these Democrats, Cory Booker talking about peaceful protest out of Connecticut, Murphy, and who was it? Nanette, I've got to see if I have her name right. It's Representative Nanette Berrigan. If ICE left, if National Guard would leave, this would all die down. Now,
well, I don't think so.
You don't think, because ICE, it might for a period, but it's only building for later on.
Right. I think what they're doing is, to some degree, this has been planned. This is not accidental. They've always been waiting for these types of situations so they can take advantage of them. But the advantage they're trying to take is, it's an old time playbook. The action is in the reaction. So generate the violence, force some sort of action to fix it, and then start blaming and propagandizing around that action. And that's what we're seeing. They would like very much to, in the public's mind, convict President Trump of being some sort of horrible dictator, a king, a monarch, a dictator, and he's coming in with these heavy-handed tactics. And the only way they can do that is if they spin the story in such a way that the American people don't know what actually took place. That's why it's so important for us to know what started these riots. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't about immigration. It was literally about serving warrants because there was massive criminality being investigated, which is something I don't think any American wants to see not investigated. We don't want criminals to be able to engage carte blanche in criminal activity, hurting people. We've had too much of that over recent decades. So that's coming to a stop. But for propaganda purposes, if they can make it appear like President Trump is a terrible person, a dictator, a monarch, he's building a police state, then they can try to energize their base. And energizing their base moves them toward election success. This is what they think. Moves them toward midterm election success, moves them toward possibly putting in place rationale for impeachment efforts following the midterms, and sets up what they think would be a successful campaign platform for presidency the next time around. And so this is, I think, what they're doing. They're trying to use this to set the stage for these political purposes down the road.
Possibly for Gavin Newsom. When we come back from break, I'll ask you to weigh in on, can a president send in the National Guard? Obviously, he's going to send in the Marines. I have my opinion, but we'll ask your opinion when we come back, and we'll get into that funding, where some of the ties of this lead back to. That's always the question people ask. We'll be right back with Dennis Behreandt. Stay tuned. The Tamara Scott Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
And one of those products we offer you, again, we offer you a variety because everybody has different likes and preferences and responds differently. So these are what we call swish and swallows. You can swish them for 3 seconds, 30 seconds, 3 minutes, whatever you like, and then swallow. The lavender's for ladies. There are no hormonal supplements, but if you're taking some, you might want to check with your doctor just to be sure that everything is okay. The blue is for anybody over 18, male or female. This has the glutathione. Glutathione is known to help you with oxygen. If you were a life-based form, which we are, you would not survive 4 to 7 minutes after without glutathione. So something to think about. It helps with 400 cellular functions. It's an antioxidant, but also detoxes. It detoxes heavy metals, forever chemicals, and graphene oxide. One of those chemicals that I had never heard about till 2020. It helps detox that. It also helps detox glyphosate, which is another chemical people are concerned about. They hear about it in ag products, and we hear concerns about links to cancers, HPVs, and diabetes. This helps detox. There are folks who use IVs with glutathione, but they're very expensive. And of course, there's a peak and then it wanes. This is a great way to have it every day. And less expensively. So this is also used in conjunction with your other bottles. You can use them all together. On your screen, you see the mango colored. That mango colored bottle is a newer product. It is called Numi Neuro. Numi Neuro helps with your mind, your memory, and your focus. When used with the blue bottle, the results were so impressive that the American Brain Council actually wrote something so positive, it's being touted as an endorsement. So that is with your Numi Neuro and your Numi your Numi Neuro and your Numi Blue together. You can see that at NUMI.com/TTSS, NUMI.com/TTSS. And I appreciate the comments from so many of you telling me you love the product and what it's doing for you. We want you feeling your best so you can be on the front line fighting for your family and your freedom. I'm talking with Dennis Behreandt. He's the author of Endgame. He's a journalist, he's an author, he's a speaker. And so we're talking about the LA riots. And we were just talking about the fact that Trump is the one who is squelching it. He's bringing it to a halt. He's getting control before more people are harmed and more property is destroyed. Now, some of them are accusing him. I think Newsom is accusing him, or others are accusing him of starting civil war. I would tell you he's dismantling all-out war because he's stopping an invasion. This appears to be an invasion. Many of us have seen this happening for the last few decades, even more so in the last administration. We've known it. We've been concerned about it, whether it is a jihad, whether it is this type of a behavior. If someone is not here in hopes of assimilating and legally becoming part of the process, then you have someone who is not with you. They're not in your best interest. All right. So your thoughts on this, Dennis? I mean, I don't think he's causing the war. I think he's squelching it.
I agree with that. I think if you just stand back and look at the visual imagery coming from the riot, what can you learn from that visual imagery? And I think one of the key factors, one of the key pieces of information you glean from just looking, using your eyes and seeing what there is to see, you're seeing that the protesters, if you will want to call them protesters to follow leftist protocol here, they're all very aggressively waving the Mexican flag. They're very aggressively burning the American flag, and there are a lot of them, and they're engaging in a great deal of violence. And we also know that there has been now a decades-long campaign to return the Southwest of the United States to Mexico. This has been largely unacknowledged in the press, in the mainstream press, but there's been a lot of activity over many decades to agitate for that. You will see some of that rising up in some of the left-wing posts that you'll run across on social media now that, oh, I'm standing in California and this used to be Mexico. I saw a map that was published by a social media user that got an awful lot of attention yesterday, maybe it was 2 days ago, on X, showing a division of the United States that allowed the Southwest, or implied that the Southwestern states actually belong to Mexico. So you take all of this in aggregate and you look at it and you think, my gosh, this is not just an LA riot. This is something bigger that is taking place. And after all of the Democrat-enabled undocumented immigration across our border, you start to wonder if there's something greater at play here. And I think that it's no longer an academic matter to wonder about this. You have to wonder about the safety of the country at this point, whether or not we're going to see what I think has come to be called a color revolution taking place in the streets of our nation that would result in this kind of partition of the country and the destruction of the United States as an entity. I think Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, she hasn't outright said this, but in her statement saying that, Los Angeles is an immigrant city, I thought it was an American city. So what is she getting at? Is she saying that in her mind, LA is no longer American? You start to wonder whether or not these people who are there in positions of power, as well as the people conducting these riots, have a bigger plan in play. And that, I think, leads to question marks as to how the administration is going to handle this moving forward. Certainly, they have put in place some rhetoric that would suggest what they're thinking.
Right. And very well said. Isn't this an American city? I heard her talking about the immigrant city as well. And okay, even if it's an American city, I don't care if it's Midwest values in Kansas somewhere. We wouldn't let them burn up cars either. We wouldn't let them storm the streets and hurt people and create violence either.
Right.
So how much more should those who are here as guests, even if we don't call them illegal, if you're here and you're not an American citizen, you are a guest, invited or otherwise. So why would we tolerate behavior out of you that we would not tolerate out of those under the Constitution, right? So, all right. Let's talk. We mentioned just briefly, I think you said it very well to me in a text, and I think this needs to be an article or at a title somewhere. This is not an insurrection. This is a riot initiative. This is the LA Riot Initiative. We'll talk about that a little bit later on about what we expect coming up this weekend with potential riots happening, being organized all out in other cities. But who's funding this? We hear this all the time, Dennis. When I was at the U.S. Supreme Court hearings for various candidates, people were just being flown in, trucked in. They would tell us, "Oh, they called me last night and said they'd fly me in." Who are they? Do we have proof? I think we do now that these folks aren't just showing up in the streets. These are funded.
We have some allegations that are really troubling, and I want to be really clear at the outset. I'm going to be relying on some sources that are now out there that are being reported by places like the New York Post. So I'm not making these allegations directly. I'm just going to tell you what I'm seeing. And I think that some of these organizations, at least one of them, is denying it. So for on the record, people need to know that they're denying that they're doing this, that they're involved directly. But nonetheless, let's give a shout out to the New York Post. They carried it nationally. They referred to a source that goes by the Twitter handle @DataRepublican. And according to @DataRepublican, one of the key organizations involved in this is the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, or CHIRLA, CHIRLA. And again, CHIRLA has said that they are not participating in these riots. So I think we need to give them the benefit of the doubt. But if they have been, and that needs to be that needs to be discovered, that needs to be under investigation. I think the Federal Bureau of Investigation under Kash Patel has allegedly said that they are looking into this kind of funding. And if it's Churla that's doing it, again, I'm not saying that they are or aren't, but if the allegation is true, they have received a lot of taxpayer funding. They've received millions, tens of millions of dollars in taxpayer funding. I believe the U.S. Department of Defense, possibly the Immigration and Naturalization Services, some element of the federal government was funding them to the tune of $450,000. I believe that funding was not yet completed and has now been withdrawn. That was the latest I saw this morning, so that's potentially breaking news. But they're not the only ones, to be looked into whether or not they're involved. Another organization that may be involved, and I think is almost certainly involved, is I think it's called the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Let me make sure I've got that right here. Let me see if I can find that in the New York Post reporting.
While you're looking at that,
Party for Socialism and Liberation, that's it. And so they are branding, apparently, according to the New York Post, some of the placards and other materials that are showing up in the protest are branded from that organization. It's a very shadowy organization. It's not known for sure who funds it. It's not a registered NGO in the normal sense. So clearly there's some shadowy organization behind what's taking place there. There's allegations that there's an American billionaire. I forget his name off the top of my head, but he lives in Singapore, or is it Shanghai? Could be. I think it's Shanghai. He lives with his wife there. They're both Americans, but they live abroad. They've been alleged to have deep ties to Huawei and the Chinese Communist Party, and that they have funded a number of very left-wing initiatives here in this country. And it's been alleged, I believe, by the New York Post as well, that that person may be involved in funding some of this. That's an interesting fact that people need to be aware of. Everyone talks about how awful it is that the oligarchs are supporting so-called the president, and they point to Elon Musk. But a great number of the very wealthiest people on the planet actually support these extreme left-wing agendas, and this would be one such case. And there's another that I can cite and will cite later when we talk about what may be happening soon across the country.
Right. Question for you. When they talk about this group called the Data Republican, is that one more hope to insinuate or imply that this is a mega movement, or this is caused by mega somehow, or is this, are they really Republican is what I'm asking?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone knows who is behind the handle @DataRepublican. I'm not familiar with that source. Apparently, they just crunch the numbers and do the investigation and post those things out on X. And that I saw that post earlier before the New York Post took it up and ran with it. But it does appear that they did their homework in this case. And I think that's, again, an example of how important the free press is and how important a free social media is. If we were under the Biden administration and their strong push for censorship that we experienced up until the last presidential election, we wouldn't have heard any of this. X would be still shut down and quite marginalized in terms of what gets published there. We wouldn't know any of this information. It would be completely, transparent to the American people. So this is an important part of why we need a free press and why we need a free social media and why the First Amendment is so important. And who was it that was pushing to get rid of the First Amendment? It was the Democrats. We can never forget that. They wanted to get rid of the First Amendment. We would be uninformed and unable to take informed action in support of our republic if they had gotten away with destroying the First Amendment like they wanted.
Good word. All right. Tell us the other group that you haven't mentioned that could possibly be behind these riots and funding.
Well, coming up on Saturday, I think that's the 14th. I believe it's Saturday that they're doing this.
Armed Forces Day, by the way.
Yeah, all across the country, they're funding what's going to be called the No Kings protest.
Flag Day. I have to correct myself. It's Flag Day.
Flag Day. Yep. So on Flag Day, they're going to have an anti-American rally all across the country, and every state, multiple rallies in all 50 states under the banner of the No Kings organization. And No Kings is affiliated with another organization. I believe the name of it is Indivisible, that was founded by a couple of former Democrat Party congressional staffers. And they receive millions of dollars. I saw reported that they receive millions of dollars in funding over recent years from the Open Society Foundation, which is George Soros. So we have international funding coming in to make these protests take place. And I'm concerned under the current situation with what's happening in Los Angeles. I think all Americans should be concerned. What does this June 14th protest organization all across the country turn into? It's a very inflammatory situation right now with the way they're propagandizing what's taking place in Los Angeles. And I think the potential for truly horrible outcomes is being put in place with regard to this nationwide protest. It's very concerning to me, and I think it should be of concern to most Americans.
We've got to go to our third and final break. We'll be right back with Dennis Behreandt, but I want to talk more about this and about the initiative you are talking about. Ironic that it's on Flag Day. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
But with Brandon, it's always cutting edge stuff happening in the world. And it's not just from the political angle, because you can get that on other platforms, but it's always from the biblical angle. So you're dealing with a guy that loves Jesus, you're dealing with a guy that's very intelligent, you're dealing with a guy that is cutting edge conservatism, and you're dealing with a guy that wants to be biblical all at the same time. And so for that reason alone, I hope many, many people will not just lift up his ministry in prayer, but will also financially get behind it, because from the angle I'm trying to describe, he really is the only game in town. And we desperately need it in these last days. Can I get an amen to that?
All right, I'm talking with Dennis Behreandt. We're talking about the LA riots. Dennis, when I hear you saying that funding is likely coming or supposedly or allegedly coming from groups outside of America, isn't that foreign interest? Isn't that foreign interest funding or fueling civil unrest, anarchy? Where's the thin line between that and an act of war?
Boy, that's, we're right on the border of that. You're absolutely right. And that's why I'm so worried about it. And it concerns me to see our country coming under this kind of attack internationally and focused on action within our borders. And I think that is what is behind some of the rumblings coming out of the Trump administration. Like I said before the break, they are using some rhetoric that makes it sound like there's more in play here. The president himself referred to what was taking place in LA with the word insurrection. He called them insurrectionists. And I think whether that's, how you view that is one thing, but let's take a look at what the left called insurrectionists. We had actually peaceful people let into the Capitol building on January 6th, and those people served all kinds of prison sentences in really egregious ways. And they were called insurrectionists by the left, and they didn't burn a single car. They didn't do a single act of vandalism. And the only person who died was one of them who was shot by a federal officer in a tragic outcome. Meanwhile, we actually have cars being burned. We have Apple stores being looted. We have an innocent sushi restaurant being destroyed in Los Angeles. We have reports this morning that one person is dead under who knows what circumstances. I don't think those have been reported yet, but there's actually a fatality now allegedly associated with these riots. What is actually an insurrection in this case? And now we actually have information showing that there's probably, almost certainly, some degree of international funding. It's all tied back to a national political party here in this country. And one of the things the Insurrection Act talks about is, the president using the military forces of the United States when there is a conspiracy to attack the country. That's not the actual language in that particular legislation, which you can easily look up and read for yourself. But it's one of the things that the president is given power under that act to react to, and we're getting perilously close, I think, to where that may very well be the situation. And this is extremely regrettable. As I've said before, the political left likes to find they like to initiate an action that leads to a reaction that they can then use for greater propagandistic purposes. This is extremely dangerous. This is one of the reasons why I really don't like the leftists. I think it really harms people to do this, and we're really right there. We're really right there on the border of what could be a very serious situation with what's planned for this weekend. I really hope and pray that we don't see these things spiral out of control, because what comes after that could be very intensely bad for our country.
So I believe that Trump was within the Constitution and he had every right. I would not want someone at the federal level overriding a governor when the governor was upholding the law. But here you have Newsom totally ignoring the Constitution and his role and responsibility in upholding the Constitution, which he took an oath to uphold. So I feel like Trump is okay, not just because I'm a Republican or I may or may not like Trump. I think he's within the bounds of the Constitution to call in support. This, to me, you hear the term insurrection, as you say, but I really appreciate your wording. This is an initiative. We're seeing a growing initiative for these types of violent, we can call them protests, but riots or uprisings across the nation this weekend, June 14th, 2025. This is, maybe it's not an act of war, but boy, it's sure an act of anarchy, is it not?
One of the the key organization behind the June 14th activities, protests, is nokings.org, which you can take a look at their website. And they don't shy away from using militaristic language on their website. For instance, they talk about this coming up on June 14th as a mobilization. They talk about it being, let's see if I can see some of this other language here. They're going to do martial training, event marshals, but still it uses martial language. That stems from a militaristic outlook. I think that what they're using standard leftist militarist aphorisms in their programming, in their propaganda. And what that does is attract a particular type of mindset. And it's the type of mindset that believes in the use of potential violent direct action. And I think, sure, in a lot of small towns where these protests are planned, you're going to get a lot of people who are your typical old-fashioned Democrat Party operatives, and they're going to be carrying signs protesting and pretending it's, 1960-something, and, they're doing the things in keeping with what they understand to be Democrat Party politics from those eras. But you're going to be attracting a newer, and you're going to be attracting a more violent potential group as well. So it's very concerning. I don't want to say for sure that's what's going to happen on the 14th, but you got to be worried, especially in context of what we saw happen in 2020, where this just carried on and got way out of hand, and so much property was destroyed and lives disrupted in such violent ways. We don't want to see that in this country.
Absolutely agree. I'm talking with Dennis Behreandt. Dennis, I can give you the next 60 seconds if you want to make a closing statement.
Well, my closing statement is, I think, pray for peace, pray for our country, pray for safety and security, and let's get back to our republic and have a peaceful, structured civilization moving forward that we can all profit from and grow our families and grow our wealth and grow our well-being and lead the world. That's the way we used to be in this country. That's what our republic was founded to be, a protection from the devastating chaos of the old world, and it's being imported here. We need to make sure it doesn't happen.
Right. Such a great show, so much great information. Thank you so much to everybody out there. When we talk about 80 million in products that may not have been reported, think about the concern. We have fentanyl coming in, and I'm not implying that's the case here, but there are reasons that our government is involved in overseeing things that come in from other countries as well. We talked about harm happening to individuals who come across this border. I've said for years, it is not Christian to entice people to break the law. You don't have to ask someone to break the law before you can witness to them. You don't entice them to put their families in harm, to separate families, and to put children in harm's way. And we have, I don't know, Dennis, what's the latest number on missing children in this country because of the border situation? Do you know?
I've heard it's north of 300,000 or more. Then that's probably, again, the tip of the iceberg. Usually what we know is usually only a fraction of what the reality is.
Not compassionate, friends, not safe, not something we want in America for those children or for us. Reagan, very quickly, put up my photo. It's at the very end of the email. It's a clip that Robbie Starbuck just put up. It's just a quick little photo, if you can, at the very bottom of the email there. No, not that one. That is on Kilmar, the Garcia. There you go, this one. If you are not prepared to use force to defend civilization, then be prepared to accept barbarianism, Thomas Sowell. Can't think of anything more well said to end this program. To all of you, I think Dennis is absolutely correct. Be in prayer. And Dennis, if people want to contact you or reach out to you, how can they best do that?
The best place to do that is on X right now, and the handle is @American Daily Herald.
As everybody, we tell you, live boldly, love better, laugh bigger. Be encouraged, but do not be complacent.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and